At noon on the 8th of June 2025, the sky over the southern United States seemed as calm as any other day. The summer sun rays penetrated through the thin layer of clouds covering the greenland of Tennessee. Tullahoma, a small town in Coffee County, was peaceful, famous for its wide fields and close-knit community. No one expected that in just a moment, the name Tullahoma would appear on national emergency news. Tullahoma Regional Airport, a small airport located about 77 miles southeast of Nashville, is usually not as noisy and bustling as international airports. It mainly serves training flights, sport flights, and especially skydiving, an adventure sport that attracts thousands of participants every year. In the eyes of many, this is an ideal destination to experience the exciting feeling of diving into the sky. The fateful plane that day was a de Havilland Canada DHC-6 Twin Otter, a twin-propeller aircraft famous for its durability and short takeoff and landing capabilities. The Twin Otter has long been the backbone of many parachute units around the world thanks to its spacious cabin, large capacity, and flexibility. With the ability to carry up to 20 passengers, the plane that day was prepared to carry a group of parachutists on a group flight. The atmosphere in the cabin was filled with excitement. The parachutists chatted, checked their harnesses and equipment. Some took deep breaths to calm down. Others laughed to relieve stress. For them, each flight was not only a journey in the sky, but also a challenge to overcome their own limits. The pilot, a veteran of sport flights, calmly checked the dashboard, communicating via radio with the air traffic control station. At 12:30 p.m., the plane's wheels began to roll on the runway. The Pratt & Whitney engine roared, each revolution pushing the giant metal block forward. Outside, a few curious residents and airport staff stood watching. They had no idea that they were about to witness one of the most terrifying moments in the history of this town.
9 p.m.
Just a
local
few
time,
dozen
and
seconds
they were
later,
expecting to
when
reach
the
Lisbon
plane left
in
the
about
ground,
7 hours.
an unexpected incident occurred. People present recounted that the engine sound suddenly became unusual. The sound was out of breath. The plane could not continue to gain altitude. In the cabin, excitement quickly turned into panic. The pilot tried to control the steering wheel, trying to bring the plane back to the runway, but the time was too short and the distance was too short. At that fateful moment, life and death were separated by only a few heartbeats. And then, the plane carrying 20 people crashed into the area near the airport. The sound of metal hitting the ground resounded, and smoke and dust rose, shattering the usual peace of Tullahoma. The news spread quickly. TV channels and online newspapers simultaneously carried the headline, "Plane carrying 20 people crashed in Tennessee. Lucky to escape death. Many injured." Images from the scene. The plane was severely damaged. Passengers were helped out. Ambulance sirens blared continuously, shocked the entire United States. The accident that day did not take any lives, but left a deep wound in the hearts of the community. It was not only an aviation accident, but also a reminder of the fragility of human life in the face of unpredictable uncertainties. At noon on the 8th of June 2025, when the sun was at its zenith in the Tennessee sky, the Twin Otter DHC-6 with the parachute service number began to roll. The pilot had received the takeoff signal from the control station, and everything seemed to be going normally. The runway at Tullahoma Regional Airport is not long, but it is adequate for this type of twin-propeller aircraft. In the cramped but lively cabin, 19 passengers, most of them skydivers, are preparing for an experience they have been looking forward to for weeks. Some check their seatbelts. Others bend down to adjust the large parachutes on their backs. A few experienced athletes joke around to relieve tension. There are also faces who are new to the feeling of jumping from the sky for the first time, their eyes mixed with nervousness and excitement. The roar of the Pratt & Whitney PT-6A engine makes the floor shake slightly. For many, it is a familiar sound, like the soundtrack to an adrenaline-filled journey. No one expected that just a few minutes later, that sound would become an unusual sign of tragedy. As the clock hands pointed to 12:30 p.m., the plane accelerated down the runway. The speed gradually reached the allowed level. The pilot gently pulled the stick. The front wheel lifted off the ground, followed by the tilting fuselage of the plane taking off. In the cabin, a few small cheers rang out, as is the habit of skydiving enthusiasts. The plane began to leave the ground, gradually gaining altitude. But that voices outside recounted, "I heard the engine sound suddenly different, no longer steady as before, as if it was out of breath." Within seconds of takeoff, the Twin Otter showed signs of insufficient lift. The plane could not gain any more altitude. The engine noise became muffled. Some passengers sitting near the windows noticed an unusual vibration. The atmosphere in the cabin changed from excitement to tension. The pilot immediately made an urgent decision: abort the takeoff and try to land again. But at low altitude and short distance, all operations were extremely difficult. About 15-20 seconds after leaving the ground, the plane began to lose altitude rapidly. The pilot tried to pull the control stick, hoping to bring the nose of the plane back to the runway or at least a nearby open space. But the ton-heavy metal block was falling, and time was running out. In the cabin, many people clung to their seats, some screamed. Others automatically curled up, a survival reflex when they knew the collision was coming. For experienced skydivers, it was a moment when all the safety training suddenly came rushing back. But in that confined space, no one could open their parachute or escape. The Twin Otter crashed into the area right next to the runway. The loud crash resounded. Metal was dented, glass was shattered. Part of the fuselage was broken. The left wing hit the ground first, causing the plane to spin sideways. Smoke and dust billowed. The smell of gasoline and burning plastic spread. Screams for help mixed with the alarm in the cabin. At that moment, all 20 people realized that they had just crossed the fragile boundary between life and death. After the crash, for the first few seconds, the scene was filled with terrifying silence. Only the sound of hot metal clanking, the sound of wind whistling through the gaps in the fuselage remained. Then, suddenly, groans and cries for help rang out, breaking the silence. Outside the airport, witnesses recounted, "We rushed over, our hearts pounding. We couldn't believe that anyone had survived that crash." After the loud bang when the plane hit the ground, the cabin turned into a mess. The lights flickered, thick smoke rose, the smell of gasoline mixed with the pungent smell of burning plastic. Many passengers were thrown from their seats, their heads hitting the wall, blood flowing from their foreheads. Some screamed in pain, others coughed from the smoke. In the chaos, survival instincts arose. Those who were still conscious tried to unbuckle their seatbelts and help each other out of the emergency door. One survivor recounted, "Everything happened so fast. I only remember the plane shaking violently and then falling, my eyes closed. When I opened them, smoke was filling the cabin. I tried to pull my friend sitting next to me out, even though we were both injured. The pilot, despite being severely shaken, tried to stay calm. He shouted loudly, signaling passengers to exit through the emergency exit. The co-pilot quickly opened the door, helping each person crawl out. Thanks to that command, most of the passengers escaped before the smoke and fire could spread. An experienced parachutist even turned back to pull two unconscious people out of the cabin, despite the danger. This brave action was later called by many American newspapers as a rescue angel in a disaster. Outside the airport, residents and staff witnessed the initial scene in shock. They saw the plane drop to an unusual altitude, then fall to the ground with a loud bang. For a moment, many people stood there, unable to believe what had just happened right before their eyes. But then, their community instinct urged them to rush toward the scene. One witness said, "I forgot all fear, just ran toward the smoke. In my head, there was only one thought, to save people as quickly as possible. Just a few minutes."
I only remember the plane shaking violently and falling, my eyes closed. When I opened them, smoke was filling the cabin.
To cool down the area to prevent the risk of fire and explosion. Nurses and doctors rushed to the scene to provide first aid. A list was quickly compiled. 6 injured people, one of whom was in critical condition and was taken to the emergency room by medical helicopter. The rest suffered from scratches and psychological trauma, but were fortunate to survive. A touching image spread on social media. A skydiver with a bloody face, still trying to help his friend limp out of the dusty area, his eyes steadfast despite his trembling body. Immediately after the accident, the entire Tullahoma Regional Airport was blocked. Local police set up barricades, preventing outsiders from approaching. Dozens of reporters quickly arrived, cameras and lenses focused on the pile of damaged aircraft. American television simultaneously broadcast live. The text scrolled across the screen. Breaking news: skydiving plane crashes in Tullahoma. No deaths reported. Meanwhile, thousands of Tennessee residents watched with hearts aching. Many had friends and family on the flight. Emergency phones rang constantly, everyone wanting to know the specific situation. Although no one died, the mental shock to the survivors was immense. A trembling female passenger shared, "I never thought I would get out of there. For a few seconds, I thought I was on the verge of death." The tight-knit Tennessee skydiving community was also shaken. They gathered at the hospital, hugging and crying, both thankful for life and grieving for the injuries their friends had suffered. As soon as the Twin Otter crashed near the runway, Tullahoma Regional Airport's emergency alarm system was activated. In less than 5 minutes, ambulances from the local medical center, along with firefighters and police, were on the scene. Fire crews immediately deployed water hoses to prevent the fire from the leaking fuel from spreading. A fire officer recalled, "When we arrived, the smoke was thick. Everyone was afraid that even a small spark would cause the whole plane to explode." The first priority was to protect the survivors. Medical staff quickly triaged the victims according to the severity of their injuries. One person was in critical condition, with multiple injuries, and was immediately airlifted to a major hospital in Nashville. 5 others suffered broken bones, head injuries, or minor burns, and were transported by ambulance. The remaining passengers received first aid at the scene, many with only scratches but with severe panic. Police quickly cordoned off the area. The main runway was temporarily closed. All flight operations at the airport were suspended. Curious people were kept away, with only rescuers and investigators allowed access. Large tarpaulins were erected to shield the scene, preventing the tragic images from spreading too widely. However, many videos recorded by witnesses still flooded social media, showing the scene of the plane burning in smoke, passengers staggering to escape. About 2 hours after the accident, representatives of the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, were present. Shortly after, the National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, sent a team of experts from Washington, D.C. to investigate. By law, every aviation accident in the U.S., whether it is a commercial or small civilian aircraft, must be investigated by the NTSB to determine the cause. The steps include collecting the black box, recording flight data and cockpit audio, checking the engine, fuel system, and control unit, interviewing the pilot, passengers, and witnesses, analyzing weather data and runway conditions. On the same day, the FAA confirmed no one died, but 6 people were injured. They also said the initial cause may be related to the plane not achieving the necessary lift after takeoff. Some hypotheses were put forward. Engine failure. The sound of a gasping sound heard by witnesses suggests that the engine may not be operating at its maximum capacity. Overload. The plane was carrying 20 people, nearly at its maximum capacity. If heavy parachute equipment is added, the total weight may exceed the safety threshold. Weather conditions. Even if the sky is clear, the high temperature of a summer afternoon can affect air density, reducing the lift efficiency of the wings. The main pilot, despite being slightly injured, is still cooperating with the investigation agency. He said that when accelerating, everything was stable, but as soon as the wheels left the ground, he felt that there was not enough thrust. He immediately decided to abort the takeoff and try to land again, but the distance was too short. This testimony coincides with an outside witness who confirmed that the plane tried to turn back but failed. Within a few hours, the incident became the focus of the American press. Major channels such as ABC News, CNN, and NBC all had live reports. The prominent headline, "Skydiving plane carrying venti people crashes in Tennessee. No deaths reported. Miracle in Tullahoma. All 20 survive plane crash." Netizens called it a miracle that all passengers survived. At the same time, public opinion raised questions about the safety level of the Twin Otter aircraft and the management of parachute operations. In the following days, the NTSB took the wreckage to a storage facility for detailed analysis. Engineers disassembled each part, recording the current state of damage. At the same time, they reviewed the aircraft's maintenance records. Has the aircraft been inspected regularly? Has the engine had any problems before? Did the pilot report any abnormalities in previous flights? The final results took months to be announced, but from the very beginning, the press commented, this incident would be a red alert for the U.S. sport aviation industry. The main pilot of the Twin Otter that day was a middle-aged man with more than 15 years of civilian flying experience. He had made hundreds of parachute flights and was familiar with every technical detail of this type of aircraft. As the plane was losing altitude, his split-second decision saved everyone. Instead of trying to pull up, he opted for an emergency landing, an extremely risky maneuver at low altitude, but one that reduced the risk of the plane falling out of control. In a subsequent interview with the local press, he said simply, "I just thought, I have to get them down, no matter what." Many passengers called him the unsung hero. Without his calmness, the outcome could have been different. A veteran athlete, James H., 34, is a professional skydiver. He has done more than 500 jumps, thinking he was used to all kinds of dangerous situations. But this experience was far beyond any scenario he had ever imagined. When the plane shook violently, I knew something was wrong, but we were too low to open our parachutes. I just held the hand of the person next to me and waited. First-timers. There were also first-time skydivers in the group that day. A 2-year-old girl recounted, I was worried that I would be scared when I jumped out of the plane. But it turned out that what scared me the most was the moment I was locked in the falling cabin. I cried, thinking I would never see my family again. Spirit of solidarity. Despite the panic, many people still helped each other. A young man with a broken arm still used his remaining hand to pull his friend out of the smoke. The image made the American media praise, in adversity, people become the strongest. Not only those on the plane, but also witnesses at the airport have haunting memories. A runway maintenance worker said, I heard a strange engine sound, then saw the plane wobble. When it hit the ground, my heart stopped. I thought no one would survive. But then I saw the door open, people started crawling out. It was truly a miracle. A woman living near the airport trembled as she recalled. I heard the explosion and thought there was a terrorist attack. When I ran out, I saw smoke rising, my heart ached. I prayed for everyone. At the hospital, relatives of passengers waited in tears for news. A mother hugged her son who had just escaped death, saying, You were born a second time today. God saved you. Another father quietly squeezed his son's hand, speechless. In their eyes, life became a priceless gift. This accident shocked the entire American skydiving community. For them, flying a twin otter and jumping from 10,000, 15,000 feet was a familiar experience. But now, the memory of the plane shaking, losing power, and crashing right after takeoff became an obsession. Skydiving clubs across the United States sent words of encouragement and shared with those involved. Many groups organized prayer sessions, affirming that they would not let this accident shake their passion, but also emphasized the need to learn from experience about safety. In the midst of the disaster, many humane moments moved Americans. A seriously injured person still gave up his stretcher to his companion, saying, Take him first. A local nurse volunteered to work for 12 hours straight, not leaving the scene until everyone was safely transferred to the hospital. Civilian witnesses, who were not trained, rushed in to pull people out of the cabin, despite the risk of fire and explosion. These stories have turned the disaster into a reminder that even in danger, courage and humanity shine through. There were also first-time skydivers in the group that day. A 22-year-old girl recounted, I was worried that I would be scared when I jumped out of the plane. But it turned out that what scared me the most was the moment I was locked in the falling cabin. I cried, thinking I would never see my family again. Spirit of solidarity. Despite the panic, many people still helped each other. A young man with a broken arm still used his remaining hand to pull his friend out of the smoke. The image made the American media praise. In adversity, people become the strongest. Not only those on the plane, but also witnesses at the airport have haunting memories. A runway maintenance worker said, I heard a strange engine sound, then saw the plane wobble. When it hit the ground, my heart stopped. I thought no one would survive. But then I saw the door open. People started crawling out. It was truly a miracle. A woman living near the airport trembled as she recalled, I heard the explosion and thought there was a terrorist attack. When I ran out, I saw smoke rising. My heart ached. I prayed for everyone. At the hospital, relatives of passengers waited in tears for news. A mother hugged her son who had just escaped death, saying, You were born a second time today. God saved you. Another father quietly squeezed his son's hand, speechless. In their eyes, life became a priceless gift. This accident shocked the entire American skydiving community. For them, flying a twin otter and jumping from 10,000, 15,000 feet was a familiar experience. But now, the memory of the plane shaking, losing power, and crashing right after takeoff became an obsession. Skydiving clubs across the United States sent words of encouragement and shared with those involved. Many groups organized prayer sessions, affirming that they would not let this accident shake their passion, but also emphasized the need to learn from experience about safety. In the midst of the disaster, many humane moments moved Americans. A seriously injured person still gave up his stretcher to his companion, saying, Take him first. A local nurse volunteered to work for 12 hours straight, not leaving the scene until everyone was safely transferred to the hospital. Civilian witnesses, who were not trained, rushed in to pull people out of the cabin, despite the risk of fire and explosion. These stories have turned the disaster into a reminder that even in danger, courage and humanity shine through.